Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our unusual episode of Scotonomics, and it's just about me and my travels. The reason that we have turned this into an episode tonight is that it was a journey to an economics conference in Ireland. So hopefully there's some good bits of information and nuggets that I picked up there that I can pass on to you. So if you haven't heard of the Kilkenomics Festival before, it's organised by the Irish economist David McWilliams, a previous guest of ours, and it stretches across 4 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and there's round about maybe 50 sessions looking at the economics in a whole variety of different ways, and they also use stand-up comedians to interrogate some of the economists. So it's really great. It's a really light and informal way of looking at some rather dry and complicated topics. I think we've got a real similarity with what we're doing on Scotonomics and with what David McWilliams does on his podcast, and it's that we're trying to bring economics to a group of people who wouldn't normally or usually engage with the type of topics that we're covering. So we feel we're kind of like a kindred spirit with Kilkenomics. And another one of the reasons that I headed over there was because we're planning Scotonomics Live in Dundee in March next year. So a lot more information about that as we firm up the list of speakers and also get into the planning of the event. But some of you may know or may not know, I'm actually or was an events organizer by trade. I've been organizing events for 25 years. So hopefully we'll be able to bring you a fantastic live event in Dundee next year. Actually, I'm sure we will. So if you haven't been to Kilkenny before, a wonderful place. It was my first time. I'll certainly head back. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really nice city, lots of things going on there, but we were extensively there for this economics festival. All the bars were packed. The venues were really busy. They had maybe a couple of shows with 500-600 people watching, so really popular, and there was a wide variety of people right across Ireland, but also I spoke to a few people from the UK. One of my favourite sessions was an interview with David McWilliams and Yanis Varoufakis, and it was a really interesting session. It was absolutely packed on the Friday night, and Yanis was discussing what he said was now the death of capitalism, and he was a bit annoyed that it wasn't the left that had killed capitalism, but he suggested that capitalism has now ended and we're now back to something he called techno-feudalism, which is this idea that we've advanced so far in terms of digital space that the people who own these mega companies are actually harking back to feudal times, and they're using their power and their influence. He's got a new book out, I think in April next year, which we're delving into a lot more detail on that, but I thought it was fascinating, and I was really thinking about that as we went through the weekend. One of the figures he said was that your kind of traditional multinational, say something like General Electric or a company like that, might have spent 80% of its costs on wages, and Facebook and Google spend between 1% and 2% on staff. So that was a figure I just thought, how can we still live in a world where so little of the money made by these companies is actually being returned to labour? Because obviously all of that profit is effectively going to capital. So really interesting. And as you'll see in this little clip that we've got from Ha Jung Chang, we really need to understand that the economy is just now, it's not fixed. It's actually there because people have designed it, and we do have the opportunity to do something very different. I thought this was a wonderful little section we've got from
sometimes known as neoliberal the model, that we think that capitalism has always been like this, but until the 1970s, we had very different kinds of capitalism. This was a time when, in the late 40s and until the mid 1950s, the top income tax rate in the United States was 92%. That's unthinkable in today's terms. It was a time when Britain had the income inequality that was even lower than some of the Soviet bloc countries.
Now, the UK was one of the hot topics across the whole of the 4 days. And unfortunately, most of the commentators weren't predicting a particularly bright future for the United Kingdom. And I've got to say, I felt a little bit envious of the Irish people in the audience who were watching it from afar rather than being part of it. And, you know, it's a really different perspective from them. They were kind of saying they were getting popcorn out and watching the bin fire that was the UK economy, and also the Conservative leadership campaigns over the last few months as well. So it was really difficult to be there thinking that Scotland's still part of this economy, which is going to face huge problems. Now, a lot of people were saying the America is likely to be in a recession soon, if not already, and also Europe. And they were predicting relatively mild recessions for the Eurozone and for America, but unfortunately not for the United Kingdom. And most of the commentators that I spoke to were suggesting that the recession in the United Kingdom was going to be among the worst in the G20 group. So that was definitely a key theme, was that the United Kingdom is in a particularly difficult situation compared to other countries. And I thought that was really interesting, considering the economics of Scotland and its role within the United Kingdom. Now, the second key theme that I noticed was the need for people to understand economics. And this was actually raised first on the Friday evening, the first show that I went to see by Ha-Joon Chang, who one of his books I've got here. And he was just saying that throughout his career, he's always tried to bring economics to a different audience. And again, similar to what David McWilliams is doing at Kilkenomics and his podcast, and also what we're trying to do with Scotonomics. So here's a little clip of Ha-Joon Chang speaking about the importance of people understanding economics.
So it's become politically so important that actually people don't, powerful people don't want the general public to know about economics. No, just think about it. In the medieval times, the Vatican wouldn't let you translate the Bible into vernacular languages. So if you don't know Latin, you cannot even understand what's going on. Then you will just have to swallow whatever your local priest and the occasional bishops give you.
Now, I hope the Kilkenomics team don't mind me stealing a little bit of the content from a couple of the shows. Unfortunately, and I've got to say, mind-bogglingly, they didn't live stream any of the sessions. But not only that, they actually didn't record any of the sessions. So a huge amount of incredible content was only available for the people in the room. And I assure you, when we have similar fantastic sessions at Scotonomics in Dundee, we'll be recording so we can push them out to a wide an audience as possible. It was a real shame, and still to follow up with David to try and find out why he wasn't capturing all of that content. Now, the third theme that I picked up from the sessions was really the impact of monetary policy and central banks over the last 10 years, and almost universal, right across a very wide range of panelists, there was a clear consensus that this domination of monetary policy carried out by an organisation which is not elected, being central banks, was damaging the global economy. Now, this has been a theme that we've had speakers cover, for example, Claudia Sam, who looked at this and said that the Fed was potentially bringing about a debt crisis in the developing world at the time when they can least afford to manage that as they gear up for the climate crisis. But universally across all of the panels was this problem with the central banks. And here's Paul McCulley, who's a formal MD at Pimlico, which is an investment management company. And here's his view on the problems and what we need to do about it with central banks.
The money changers are running the world is really the responsibility of democratic governments. Because democratic governments gave the money changers the power that they have. And I want to be optimistic that will happen, not immediately, but over the next 5 to 10 years, if you will, only because the global citizenry will say, this is happy horseshit and I don't want any more of this.
So there's a few clips and a few pictures from some of the sessions that I went to. I actually went to about 10 in total, a huge wide variety of different topics and different speakers, and the quality of the sessions was absolutely fantastic. So if you do get a chance to head over to Kilkenomics at some point, I'd thoroughly recommend it. I think you'd have a fantastic time. And if you can't manage that far, then I do hope you'll consider attending Scotonomics Live in March, the weekend of the 24th, 25th, and 26th of March. and that'll be taking place in Dundee. Well, that's it for this very short episode 52 of Scotonomics. We have some incredible speakers coming up before the end of the year, and I'm really looking forward to sharing those discussions with you as we head into Christmas. Bye for now.